Thanks very much, TT, and greetings to the listeners. Look, it's important that whenever Parliament calls for us to come and account, we do so because it will also be a bad sign to refuse to take the committee into confidence about any initiative that we are doing. So the meeting unfolded as I expected it. It was very, very robust, and it was robust because members of the portfolio committee wanted to interact with me about the logic of the policy direction that we are seeking to introduce and what it means. And there was a lot of prehistoric views that people had, and members of parliament being members of parliament, they use parliament rightfully so in many an instance to speak to their audience. So the engagement, some of it was beyond what we are trying to do, but we embrace it because I'm a big boy enough. But it was an opportunity to provide clarity in terms of why we are seeking a policy direction that seeks to make sure that the use or the opportunity for multinationals in the ICT sector to do business in South Africa through the equity equivalence program is allowed because that is applicable in other sectors. And that doesn't mean, contrary to some people's belief, that we are advocating that the 30% local ownership should not be complied with. We are saying that the option for those two choices must always be available because that is what the law says in terms of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act.
Right. So, just to be clear here, what
Yeah.
you are seeking to do here is not to, as I see some members of the portfolio committee were accusing of doing, of sidestepping existing legislation or trying to get some sort of variance from the existing legislation.
Absolutely not. And I don't know whether it is because of a fundamental misunderstanding that they had or just purely a lack of knowledge. So basically, the dilemma we're trying to reconcile is that when you look at the Broad-Based Economic Empowerment Act, it stipulates correctly that for multinationals wanting to do business in South Africa, they can either cede 30% of their equity ownership or invest in equity equivalent programs, which means that investing in doing business with local service providers, creating jobs, investing in research development and enterprise development. However, ICASA, which is the regulator for the telecommunications sector, in 2021, when they made their regulations for individual license applications, only focused on ownership and did not look at other alternatives of empowerment. And that's why we are saying that it is important to do that because we are trying to address two bigger issues. One is attracting investment for our country, but secondly, looking at alternative ways and broadening our options to how we extend broadband connectivity to poor communities, to rural towns, to farming towns, so that we can increase the levels of broadband access for all of South Africa.
So the impression has also been created, or at least, yes, yeah. Let me put it that way to say the impression has been also created out there, or there exists a perception and impression exists that this is a special arrangement that is being done purely to accommodate Starlink in South Africa. Let's firstly answer whether that this is the case.
It's absolutely not the case. And I'm very comforted, TT, by the fact that we began working on this policy directive in September. And on the 4th of October, I then released a public statement after writing to ICASA, as I'm compelled by Section 3 of the Electronic Communications Act. Whenever a minister wants to issue a policy directive, the first step you do is to express the intention to ICASA and provide reasons why you seek to issue the policy directive. The second process is, upon receiving the policy directive, ICASA is entitled to engage with it and submit its reasons. They did so and submitted their reasons towards the end of, or in fact, early this year. And after having spent a considerable amount of time interrogating those reasons, I felt that the fundamental question that we are seeking to address, which is the fact that the ownership regulations for the issuing of licenses are not reconciled with the ICT sector codes, which are a direct product of the BBBE Act. It will be necessary to go to the gazetting, which is the official release of a government position or policy position, which we did last week, and we are now at the stage of receiving public comments, and any stakeholder, any political party, individual or organization that has views now has an opportunity to submit their views through that process. The other thing that I think is worth proactively dealing with is, people have said, well, why is this happening now? We did indicate, TT, and there are several media articles to this effect. We did indicate in November that we are targeting that this be finalized, the policy direction be finalized by mid-2025. And we are now towards the end of May, which is the closest month possible to mid-2025. At the time, I did not have the foresight that the visit led by the president of our country and the government of national unity would take place last week. But I do understand the concern that people may have around that timing, but I'm equally comforted by the fact that both the president of the country and any other member of the executive who was in the U.S. during that visit unequivocally stated that there was no discussion whatsoever in official meetings about Starlink.
Then has anyone, either in your department or with the regulator, had any deliberations or discussions with Starlink, either a representative of Starlink or with Elon Musk himself?
No, not from the department. With the regulator, I wouldn't know, because the regulator should operate independently. But yeah, that question can be dealt with appropriately by ICASA.
Okay. What then? So there's no need. From what I'm understanding, the provision is there in the law. So there is no need for anything, for passing of any further legislation from if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, so what we're saying is you've got a unique situation wherein the ICT sector codes, which are codes around Black economic empowerment applicable in the sector, make provision for equity equivalent programs. And that's why you've got companies like Microsoft and IBM already investing in South Africa, because those are not, 30% of their business is not owned by local South Africans, but they chose to enter the South African market through the equity equivalence program. And that's what we are calling for, that the option to choose must be available throughout the entirety of the sector, including in the telecom space regarding the issuing of licenses, where it is currently not applicable due to the fact that in 2021, the regulator formulated regulations that then did not adequately cover the spirit of the ICT sector codes.
Then it does beg the question why this workaround was created in the first place.
Please clarify that. What workaround?
Like I'm saying, why do we make this provision for equity equivalence? As opposed to just going the normal way, or that is governed in terms of BEE legislation.
Yeah, and that's an important question, because an equity equivalent is not a departure from BEE. And that's the point that we keep making. It is provided for in terms of the Broad-Based Economic Empowerment Act. And we are saying that the option for multinationals, because there are several multinationals who, for a variety of reasons, some may not be keen to seize 30% of their ownership to locals, that should not hinder their ability and their appetite to enter the South African market.
The concerns were also around whether there is, if we go this route, are there different pieces of legislation that are applicable to this sort of, arrangement, if I can call it that, or this type of proposal? where, for example, the chair of the portfolio committee was talking about, there seems to be, and it appears that, the gazetted policy is in contravention of the Electronic Communications Act.
No, some have advocated that, the alternative should be an amendment of the Electronic Communications Act. And I've said, because I'm open-minded and I'm also mindful of the process, that there are several options that are available to address the question that we are dealing with. And the policy directive instrument is one of those. And that policy directive instrument does not seek to amend legislation. It seeks purely to say regulations must be in harmony with the provisions of the Act. Because as the Minister for Communications and Digital Technologies, I've got a responsibility to ensure that there is full compliance not only with the Electronic Communications Act, but with all national laws and policies that are applicable in our country.
What next then? Where do we go from now? I mean, you have gazetted the policy. Based on today's interactions with the members of the portfolio committee, I don't know whether there were any directives or whether they required anything further from you, or what's the way forward?
So the way forward is obviously the committee, and I haven't seen whether they released official communication about their positions because different parties had different views. But in terms of the Gazette and its lifespan, we are now open for public comment. There is a 30-day window period in which public comments can be submitted, and subsequent to that, we will then obviously face the industrious task of going through all those comments, and we will consider them because that's what the law dictates, that the final policy direction must be informed also by the input from the public comments.
All right. Sorry, Malatsi, thank you very much. I know we have to let you go, so we'll release you at this point, and we'll certainly watch what happens next with this story. Thank you very much for your time.
Tangi.